And we are live with the multi-talented Maya Wiley, lawyer, college professor, former New York City mayoral aide, mayoral candidate, legal commentator on MSNBC, and now the president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. Maya, thanks for joining us.
John, it's always good to be with you. Thanks for having me. I will make only one correction.
Yes.
I'm a law school professor
Oh, fair enough.
sporadically.
Okay. Let me start with the grave news today that implicates the biggest of all human rights, and that is another ICE killing in Maine. 26-year-old man, Colombian, apparently, according to immigration advocates, had the legal authorization to work in the United States. The ICE has put out a story saying that he was weaponizing his vehicle and trying to ram them. We have seen that exposed as a cover-your-ass lie in case after case after case. We recently had a shooting in Texas, and these two have brought back to the headlines something that we thought had kind of calmed down after Minneapolis. What can be done about this, and what do you have to say about this from your perspective?
Well, let's start by saying, sadly, there's a difference between what's actually calmed down and what's in the news headlines. And we knew that ICE abuses were still continuing. You're absolutely right in terms of the fact that there had been statements from the federal government that they had essentially somehow pulled back some on how ICE was operating in our communities. But if you talk to people in neighborhoods, they were not feeling it that same way. So sadly, we should not be surprised in a context where ICE has been allowed to behave with impunity and to have almost no oversight. And one thing I want to make very clear is the thing about ICE is many immigrants' rights and civil liberties groups were complaining about not having sufficient oversight and transparency about Border Patrol and ICE even before this administration. So just to say, for a long time, we've been saying there have been issues with deaths in custody. There have been issues with excessive force. There have been issues with U.S. citizens being deported, but never like this. So really what we would say about this is this current administration has given permission to violating the constitutional rights of people, and that it has done so in a way that if we had appropriate oversight, which would be two things. One is Congress doing its oversight job and having hearings on what's happening, demanding information, demanding transparency about the complaints that they're getting, and demanding explanation about why ICE and why the federal government is not also working with local law enforcement. We saw this out of Texas. We saw this out of Minnesota. What people need to understand is normally we'd see some engagement of federal law enforcement with local law enforcement when there was a claim such as this of an unlawful killing of someone by a federal agent. The fact that there's zero information sharing, a refusal, so to your point, outright statements that the facts don't support. We call that a lie in my world, but in the legal world, we'll say the facts do not support the statement. And then to come to find out and get independent evidence, either from video footage or in the case in Houston of Mr. Salgado Rojo, eyewitnesses had said that what ICE is reporting was false. And now this Maine shooting, and there have been others, shooting and either not killed or shooting and killed, where there has simply not been sufficient independent verification of just basic facts and sharing them. So what we have to demand is you don't get to kill with impunity. There should be congressional oversight, and there should be internal mechanisms of ensuring that information is being shared in a way the public can trust at the appropriate times. We as a civil rights community are calling for this, have been calling for this, won't stop calling for it. But just remember this: if the federal government can have law enforcement officers not only killing people, but killing them without any accountability, they're also and have been saying that local law enforcement should also have less civilian oversight. Think about that.
Maya, we have not, as you indicated, had congressional oversight with any effectiveness whatsoever. Do you feel in this moment, in the wake of these two killings, helpless in that situation? Or do you think the different political environment of midsummer, elections approaching, big Senate race in Maine, is that likely to produce a different outcome and to have some effect at changing the behavior of ICE?
I believe so. Look, if you're running for office in Maine right now and you have someone who has just lost their life, and to your point, in a context, no matter your party, no matter your party and politics, most people do not believe that federal agents or anyone should be able to take life without any accountability. Most people think that's wrong. And in this context, we've already had a number of folks, different political bents, positions, raising real concerns about everything from due process to just making sure that to the extent we're enforcing laws, we're enforcing them in ways that go after the people who are actually a danger to the public, not making it more dangerous for the public. And then you add on the racial profiling. I mean, we've had US citizens and know people who feel like they have to carry passports
Hmm.
because they have to be afraid of what happens if they get stopped, whether it's National Guard or ICE or Border Patrol. It is a context which most Americans recognize our values of freedom, our values of our constitutional rights are actually in question. And you usually want your politicians, no matter their party, to just make sure things are working the way they're supposed to. And that includes our rights. I think if you're Susan Collins, you've got to be thinking about what position you're taking right now. I know that this is true in Texas. I think it's more empowering, not because it's not devastating. Let's just start. This is a loss of human life. These are families that can't get these family members back. These are workers. These are people who are contributing to society and who are getting painted with a paintbrush because of their race.
There was a
Uh,
child in pajamas on the scene of that tragedy today who we believe was the child of the victim.
Yeah. And there's still more we're going to learn about what happened here, but this is the point. There are real costs to real people, but also to families and communities. So it's a tragedy, but it's a tragedy that is now becoming so rampant that it is creating the opportunity for us to recognize what our power truly is, which is to say, these are our streets, these are our communities, these are our families. We have to care about all of them. And there's no way we can have public safety if the public isn't safe from law enforcement. And that
Let,
includes ICE.
let me step back for a minute and look at the big picture from two different measures. We've just had the 250th birthday of the country, and I think it's undeniable that the country has moved forward and advanced civil rights over that span. We're also coming up to the 18-month mark of this second Trump presidency, which has unleashed a substantial assault on some of those advances. It's become a very unpopular administration. Does that tell you that the side of civil rights, your side, is winning or not?
Well, the side of civil rights, I would argue, has always been, and as a result of the work of a lot of people and a lot of struggle over a lot of generations, are shared values of most Americans. I would argue we are the majority of this country who value civil rights. Again, that's a nonpartisan statement, right? That's not, that's people will agree across party lines that you should have due process protections, that you shouldn't be racially profiled, that of course you should be able to get a job when you seek it if you're qualified for the job. These are basic principles, and that you should be safe from police violence. You should be safe from abuse. Nobody really disputes that, and everyone agrees with it. I think what other people often forget that the reason that the civil rights movement is not only diverse, but has always fought for political rights, the rights to participate in deciding who leads us, is for economic participation, is
Mhm.
for quality of life, is for the possibility of prosperity and mobility. So everything that we're hearing that people are saying across parties, which is you're not solving our problems. The reason this administration is not popular is they're not solving our problems. And they're using people of color, they're using transgender people to try to suggest that they can ignore the actual problems we all share and that are also at the foundation of civil rights. So I use the example all the time. Let's take ICE as a perfect example. One budget year, their budget goes up $75 billion. Guess how much they took out of healthcare and about you being able to see a doctor and afford to see a doctor when you're sick? Well, roughly the same amount of money. They want to say they don't want to spend money on making sure we have a sustainable healthcare system with a sustainable social security system with all the things we care about that helps us take care of ourselves and families. They're not solving the problem of housing and its affordability. They're not telling us what we're going to do about jobs in this country. At the same time, when they are spending record amounts of dollars in the very things that are taking human life or taking away the very possibility for people to simply get a fair shake in this country. So when you put those two things together, they're all civil rights. Because what the civil rights community always said was those two things are connected, and they still are.
You mentioned that you think a majority of Americans are on the side of civil rights, and that's likely true. But let's talk for a moment about what is generating the headwinds that have put a minority faction within the United States in control of the American government and driving some of the things that we've been talking about. When Donald Trump was a young adult, white Christians were 80% of the United States population. Now they're just over 40%. We have also had a gender revolution that, for males among that group, has left them feeling embattled or feeling that they've lost primacy. You've had the digital revolution that has produced big economic changes that have decreased the return to brawn and more, put it more to brain, return to brains. All of those things have left a cadre of people who are stalking the MAGA movement, particularly white Christian blue collar men, feeling that they are the victims, that civil rights infractions are occurring against them. How do you deal with that as the leader of the biggest civil rights organization in the country?
Well, first by recognizing it, because one of the things you're saying, John, and everything you're saying is true. What we're seeing is the attack on civil rights coming from the wedges that some are intentionally creating, right? Suggesting that you, young white man, are worse off because people of color are getting into college or because women have unfair advantages, rather than saying, we think everybody should have the opportunity for a good job and good schools. And that is not something that is one group or the other group, but to figure out how we solve that problem together. And what we do in coalition is say, let's solve our problems. Because you know what young men share across race? The need for more jobs. But you know what we have to do is recognize that where and how we create those opportunities, what kinds of investments in education, how we make it more affordable, we should make sure works for everyone. It should work for young white men. It should work for young Black men. It should work for young Latino men. It should work for young men on Native American reservations. It should work, and we should make sure it works for all communities. And that is how we lift all boats. And I say that because that's what civil rights has always said. You know, people forget that when we fought for public education in this country historically, if we go way, way back to the Civil War, if you were young and you were white and you were not rich in the South, you probably weren't going to school because there was an intentional denial of creating a free education system for Black children. But that meant there were white children that didn't get a school education. When we had Reconstruction, the first thing that was the civil rights movement said is, no, we need schools for everyone. So when
But
we
but that's not that's been. Let me just stop you for a second and say that's been a very tough message to sell to young blue collar white men who may be inclined to see the world as a zero sum game rather than a positive sum game. How do you sell it in 2026?
So, first of all, and I think we have seen this in some election cycles, and I live in New York City,
Mhm.
and we have Zoran Mamdani. I mean, we watched folks who voted for Donald Trump vote for Zoran Mamdani. Why? Uh, Zoran Mamdani was not a race neutral candidate, but he also was a candidate that was saying very clearly and sincerely, look, We've got to solve the affordability problem. We've got to solve the opportunity problem. And we're going to be bold and have big ideas on how to do it. And, I think we make the mistake of thinking that it's hard for a reason. It's hard for a reason because we have such an intentional, large, and loud, although small, group of people who are generating the division and the hate. Part of what we have to say is no, how do we ensure that people are empowered to engage in the problem solving? So I look at our labor unions, for example, that are part of the civil rights movement. Some of them have large white bases in them. And we're working collectively on what are the solutions for the American worker and what are the solutions that ensure that all American workers are getting real opportunities. This is actually not new. You're right that you can't just run out and start saying to people, you're better off if you see yourselves as part of the civil rights movement. But when you say to people, you're better off if we're figuring out how we all get jobs, and we can't, and we have the opportunity to make sure we can all get jobs. If you're saying things like, how do we make sure that there's manufacturing jobs in your community? Or how do we make sure that you can afford to go to school and it doesn't mean you can't and you can get a job after? Like those are problems we all want to solve. So I think like anything, you need really important local organizing. Nothing ever the civil rights movement always had local organizing. It was authentic organizing, and then it was the relationships of organizations to connect those issues and those communities. And that's what we do at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. I mean, we are a coalition that is labor unions. We're a coalition that has racial justice groups. We're a coalition that has think tanks. We're a coalition that has service delivery groups. We're a coalition that really does look like America, that is multi-faith, that is no faith at all, and are atheists. And it is the way in which democracy is designed if we do it right, which is to call the questions.
Let me encourage our viewers to send in questions, and we'll get to those in a minute. But I want to ask Maya one before that. In the past, litigation has been a central element of the civil rights strategy going up to the Supreme Court. Brown v. Board on public education, the Loving case on interracial marriage, Obergefell for LGBTQ marriage. What do you do about a situation now in which it appears that a substantial segment of the Supreme Court itself feels the same sense of grievance that MAGA activists do?
Well, first of all, we recognize it's a gerrymandered court. I say that because two things we have been watching. One, this administration has lost many of the cases that have been brought to challenge its abuse of power across a whole range of issues, including a whole range of civil rights and civil liberties issues. Not all. And then when it gets, so I just want to say that because that has included some Trump appointed judges, which means, thankfully, the courts are still an option, and many cases do not go all the way up to the Supreme Court. But that said, the Supreme Court is a captured court, as Sheldon Whitehouse would say, and I would agree. It is I call it a gerrymandered court, meaning the Senate itself violated its own rules to try to deny Barack Obama, a sitting president, a hearing on his nominee, and then to literally reshift the rules to ensure that it was getting a very ideological group of people into the majority. That's a problem because our system was always intended to try to balance with the consent of Senate so that didn't happen. So what we have to do now is really insist and demand on Supreme Court reform, which includes, in my view, term limits. It includes actually having binding ethics. It includes actually how we think about, because we have to work on getting power back so that we get balance back. And hear me, I said balance back, so that we're ensuring that really qualified people who are not going to just be bent on a single ideology to dominate over the majority.
Is reform the only way to get past a circumstance where you have justices ruling in the voting rights case that, there may be a racial element to it, but if it's a partisan element at the same time, which of course there is, then it's okay. Or on the TPS case involving Haitians, yes, the president may have said a lot of hateful things, but he could have made this policy change for other reasons aside from racial prejudice or bias. Uh, is it not a problem solved by the political cycles? Does it have to be fundamental change to the
No,
court itself?
it has to be both. So at one, we have to recognize what power is and what power we have as people. And the organizing on the ground in communities and states, the organizing to make sure people are showing up to vote, that the threats and shenanigans that are trying to make it scary or to suppress votes don't win the day, because there is a huge amount of what we can do. And remember that the civil rights community itself, which started with the abolition of slavery, it's not a new civil
Hmm.
rights, nothing new about it. It's as long as the history of the country. But the way we won wasn't because people had a control of the Supreme Court. The way we won wasn't because people actually remember we were even denied the right to vote.
Hmm.
Black people as people of color in this country for 100 years after the Civil War. And we didn't win them back simply because we had all those rights. There was organizing, there was protesting, there was actual strategy at how we won back in the court of public opinion and helped people understand what we were talking about earlier, help people understand how this isn't really values that we share and it's not really solving our problems. And those kinds of things are critical. It isn't just the courts. We're never going to win only about the courts, and we need to understand that. But when we get power to ensure that politicians are protecting a multiracial democracy, are ensuring that we have the power to petition government, are ensuring that government can't abuse us, any of us, or our rights, as we've seen in the context of ICE. Perfect example is your rights aren't just violated if you're Black or Latino. Your rights are violated if you're white and you have the nerve to stand up and say you don't think it's okay.
Hmm.
I mean, this is really about all of us, but it is exactly that power of protest as well as that power of participation.
Let
And
me get to a couple of viewers' questions here that are related to the points that you were just making. I got a question that just came in from Jules. Said, "Do you think ranked choice voting is a way to get around the gerrymandering that you've spoken of?"
so there's a lot, I ran a race. It was New York's first ranked choice
Hmm.
voting election, and I co-chaired the campaign to bring ranked choice voting to New York City. For citywide elections. So let me just say this. I am a believer in the notion of proportional representation as one of the possible solutions. Like all things, we are still going to need protections and other mechanisms of investment and participation in elections that ensure that also, people of color, people who are traditionally excluded or discriminated against can participate. So I would say it's absolutely one of the democratic reforms we should take very seriously, and it's not the only one. One of the examples I'll share is, it's not like I ran for mayor in New York City because we had ranked choice, but ranked choice voting was a benefit to me in my view. Um, but I also could not run as an upstart candidate that was going to be progressive if there wasn't also a very healthy public matching program
Hmm.
on my ability to run. And so if we want to have, which I think every system should, is the real opportunity to have insurgent candidates. I was an
Hmm.
insurgent candidate. I believe in insurgency. I believe that we need to multiply the voices, and I believe we need people to feel like excited about who might represent them to get participation. So we need all those things.
Let
We
me ask a question from Saida Bokhari, which is, if the people of this celebrated democracy are so helpless at putting a stop to all of this, what promise does the rest of the world have? How do you see that?
Well, first of all, I say we're not helpless. So there is promise, and by promise I mean the promise of possibility that our collective power has. I mean, we've seen it at work. I know it's a dark time. But I 100% agree with the principle that to have to have a real fight against tyranny, which is happening in different places across the globe, we have to also, as an incredibly important power in the world, we have to be a democratic power and we have to care about civil rights and human rights, and we have to be a voice for that. One thing that we're doing in the civil rights community is learning from how others are confronting tyranny in other countries,
Hmm.
but we're also seeing the importance of not going silent on race
Hmm.
and not going silent on transgender, not allowing the wedges that they try to drive between us. We have to confront them. And we're also learning that from countries like Brazil, where part of how they worked on their tyranny was they recognized they couldn't allow those kind of racist and othering to try, because that's what tyrants do. They use that othering to try to take and steal power.
So you reject the advice that you hear from some centrist Democrats. We got to stop talking about transgender stuff. We're just uh, uh, responding to the bait from the other side and hurting our ability to win elections and make change.
I do not ascribe to that. I think the question is how and when do you talk about it? So I think listen, what people want to do is solve their problems and make sure their daily lives are getting better. And that's all people. And that includes transgender people. And a lot of what is happening that cannot go unattacked is the way they're trying to vilify whole groups of people, stereotype them, call them enemies, make them put them in more danger and harm's way. We know people are going back in the closet as a result of the attacks that are coming on the LGBT community. That actually does it allows them and cedes ground to the tyrants and to the playbook when we allow it. The question is, how do we confront it? And I think the point is, it is not an either or to say we need to make sure people can buy homes. We need to make sure they can afford to see a doctor when they're sick. We need to actually make this country more affordable. But if we keep allowing them to distract us from making sure every single community gets the kind of solutions that we need, if we keep letting them tell us that our problem is less than 1% of the population because they want to self-identify, if we keep enabling to say, call every immigrant a criminal and suggest you can violate constitutional rights, what we're doing is allowing them to do all the other things that are refusing to solve the problems we share. And we cannot see that space or tyranny wins.
Francis asked a question that I think a lot of people are asking, which is how is accountability ever going to happen when ICE has doubled in size and gotten an enormous infusion of funding?
Us. So this is the thing. Look, I come from a people where that was always the case. And you're right about the danger. What's unique about this is literally the creation of a virtual army, right? And
Mhm.
capital. We're fighting on the budget, and we all have to fight. It's not just, this isn't an inside the beltway fight. The power of what people in Minnesota have done, the power of what people in small towns, one of the things that was happening is you'd get 100 people in a small rural town showing up to complain about what they were seeing in their community with immigration and ICE abuses when a kid disappeared from school. This is this is the power of people. And our democracy has never gotten better, not one day. Even the founders got it wrong, right? I mean, just want to say, like, we have an electoral college, that's a problem. When the founders said you had to own land to vote, we got it every single time by demanding it, and we can't stop now. In fact, all it's giving us is more opportunity to call it out and call it out in a way that helps people say, yeah, well, what would you prefer? Would you prefer to have those subsidies that helped you pay for health care? Or would you prefer to have masked men running through your community and shooting people in their cars? I don't know. Which would you prefer? It's not it is a huge opportunity for us to educate what the playbook is and what it does, and how what it actually is doing is not only making us less safe, it's taking away the very problems we want solved. And that's why this administration is getting failing marks right now, right? So it's an opportunity. It's a terrible opportunity to have. It's an opportunity we wish we didn't have, but it's an opportunity to understand our power.
Let me ask about a couple of individuals who have escalated in profile in the last couple of years for different reasons. One of them is Zoran Mondani, who you endorsed, who won an election as mayor, clearly a big political talent, but taking a lot of heat from the right and some mainstream Democrats. He's a socialist, or people who think he wants to overturn the entire American system. He's not a Christian. Um, Jonathan Greenblatt is on your board of directors. He is the head of the Anti-Defamation League. Since the violence in Gaza, the attacks in October of 2023, he's adopted a much higher profile. He has equated anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. He's tangled with Mondami. How have you handled those two people who you're involved with them? And has that created problems for you or for the leadership conference?
Well, look, I would say, as we know as a country, that the very real issues of Israel Palestine has been one that's been very divisive across the country and
Mhm.
across, and it's something we as a society have to confront. I mean, what we have done as the leadership conference, which we are a very diverse table. We are
Mhm.
not a table in which everyone agrees. That's not what coalition is. What we do is we start from principle and we work together from
Mhm.
principle and from the things we can get a significant amount of agreement on. What we have a significant amount of agreement on is we need freedom of expression and free speech and academic freedom on college campuses. What we agree on is that hate and extremism is a threat to our democracy and a threat to the very safety of our people, and we care about the safety of Palestinian Americans and Arab Americans and Muslims, and we care about the safety of Jews and our Jewish community. And the rise of hate is one, and Black community. We're still the community that, based on race, is the highest numbers of hate crimes reported. The rise in hate and extremism is something that we all have to be concerned about and care about, and we're fighting that in that way, in a principled way. We don't agree with all of our members on everything. And what we do is we work to where we can agree and where we do agree and where we are advancing civil and human rights. So I say that because coalition is always hard. Coalition, there's nothing easy about it. Diversity, we have diverse views. We have diverse experiences. We have diverse ideologies, even within the coalition. But what we share is that unless we all have the same equal opportunities, unless we're protecting that, and unless we're staying clearly focused on ensuring that this is a democracy for all of us, we all lose. And that's what's held us together. And that's where and how we've kept moving forward.
Do you reject the idea that Mamdani is anti-Semitic? And do you also reject the idea that he is posing some sort of fundamental threat? He and socialists like him are posing some sort of fundamental threat to the American way of life.
I do. I do. I think this, first of all, let me just say, on a personal level, I think Zohar Mamdani is a sincere and very decent
Mhm.
human being. And I think what we are seeing in our politics, in the labeling, I don't agree with any politician that I like and support on every issue. I never have. Who of us have? I haven't, John. I haven't agreed on every issue and everything with my own partner, and we've got two children who are 25 and 22. Right? Doesn't mean I don't love him.
I feel you. I have the same thing in my own family.
We all do, right? I mean, this is the human condition. But the point is, what we're doing is labeling to divide rather than looking at what's bringing us together. And I think Zoran Mamdani is being. I watched. I even said to him. I mean, he was he was being put in danger because he's Muslim. I mean, let's just own that. He was being put in danger and harm's way because he's Muslim.
Mhm.
That's wrong. You can disagree with him. And by the way, do I think he's anti-Semite? No. Do I think he had some things to learn about how to create relationship with Jewish leaders and communities? Yes, I do. And I watched him do it. And that's what we want in leaders. I think we want people who will recognize where and how they have to build more bridges, who will recognize that our job as 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 leaders is always to find the paths that make people's lives better and hold people together. And I think he's one of those leaders. And I think that the labeling, some is legitimately about just fear and not knowing him. Some of it is proof points that any politician has to, build the trust by walking the talk. And I think he's been doing a really good job of that. And I think there's some elements that sadly are willing to weaponize people's fear against people who are trying very hard to both not just learn, but to pull folks together. And so I just want to say I am proud to live in New York City. I'm proud to have Zohar Mamdani as mayor. I'm proud I endorsed him. And I think we have a lot of work to do together to confront the actual problems in this society. And it is not coming from Zohar Mamdani.
I want to encourage everybody to follow Maya Wiley on Substack, follow her on Twitter, on Blue Sky, and other forms of social media. Same with the Leadership Conference. Let me close with this question, which is also a viewer question. Uh, Staying in the system that is tough to change is a challenge. Can we move beyond either the Democrats or the Republicans? How do you see that?
Well, you're talking to the child of a mother who is involved in third party politics and has also been, as you know, I have my own activity level in the Democratic Party and believe very much in bipartisanship, right? All those things. I think we have to have a way of having a much bigger and bolder conversation about what really creates and sustains this multiracial democracy in a way that keeps people engaged. So I don't see that as an either or, by the way. I mean, Working Families Party is one of the ways in which people have worked to try to engage in some bigger policy ideas. I know that one of the things that I'm speaking personally now as someone who identifies with the Democratic Party is, it's our job to make a very big tent, one that works for all people, and that's the point. And I think the way in which we make sure that we have big tents is incredibly important. But if we don't get the mechanisms right, if we don't do real institutional reform that ensures democracy is protected and steeled, which I think requires big ideas, I think it doesn't matter whether it's 2 parties or 3 parties or 5 parties. I think right now we are in an existential period where it is incumbent upon us to be bigger and bolder and recognize how we make sure that people have power and that the people who are trying to divide us don't get to steal it from us because they divide us.
Hi, Wiley. Thanks so much for your time. Great conversation. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, John. Good to see
Okay.
you.
Bye bye.